Hey everyone, and welcome back to Unseen Work, where we're reminding you that you have to do the unseen work so that when you are seen, you have something to show for it. And our guest this evening is no different. Another successful person who's done something cool in the world, and we're going to unpack just how he got here and the stuff that we might not see that happened behind the scenes. So who is that, you might be asking? We're joined by Colby Sharma, who was the author of his first book, which is called The Curveball. So hopefully I'm not going to throw him any curveballs, pun absolutely intended, with my questions tonight. And we'll just bring him right in and get to chatting. So Colby, welcome to Unseen Work.
Myles, thank you so much. Great to be with you and your audience. Thanks for this opportunity.
Absolutely. So let's start at the book, right? That's neat. We reached out on Instagram. We're talking about book stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for, right? So start there. What's the book? Why'd you write it? All those typical questions.
So the book is called Curveball, Story of Grit, Adversity, Winning the Game of Life. And, really why I wrote this book is because I had a personal angst. I had a personal journey of adversity that I went through that so many people go through on a day-to-day basis. So I had a learning disability as a youth, as a teen. And that journey was profound for me to teach me grit, resiliency, and just had a profound effect on my life. In the book, I talk about it in parts. The saying to begin the book, sometimes you have to lose something to find everything. And adversity, we succeed because of adversity, not in spite of it, is a hearkening back to that time. So, that time has been pivotal for me to overcome, to graduate with honors from law school, and to be able to do work like this. I'd say the second thing is, I played baseball as a kid when I was in high school, and I used that passion and wanted to mix that with self-help and motivation and combine that with the beauty and the saving and the bonding power of sports that your audience knows so well.
Yeah, and I think those are some of my favorite books are the books where you almost forget you're learning something because the story's so good. It just feels like you're reading a fun book, and then you're like, oh, dang it, they got me. There's a message in here too, right?
Totally. I love fiction that work because it's so implicit and simple, and it's very didactic, but it's not hard hitting and it's not over the head. I mean, one of my favorite books is Harry Potter, and I love how when you get deep into it, it's such a very profound book about life and journeys and obstacles and and resourcefulness.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I forgot about Harry Potter. Man, I was all in on those books too. And there was it's like what made kids read like 800 pages was Harry Potter, right?
Absolutely, man. I read The Order of the Phoenix 700 pages within a week.
Yeah. It's like the original binge watching was reading Harry Potter before Netflix was around.
Exactly. Harry Potter and chill.
There you go. That's awesome. So you're a lawyer.
Well, law graduate.
Law graduate. So is the goal to practice law, or that's just you wanted to prove to yourself you could overcome the disability you talked about and get it done?
Honestly, I was more inspired by law because, my father was a lawyer as well. I've always loved the intellectual study of law, and the degree has been amazing for me, to shape my business sense, to shape anything that you do in life. But, I've just taken a different approach to not practicing law and just going in this creative endeavor right now, where I'm still using a lot of my legal principles and knowledge.
Sure. And I'm sure you think about like the legal research and things that go into I know you're not going to court, but you hear about that with case prep. Like, got to look for the precedents. And I'm sure in law school, it's a lot of that. And I'm sure writing a book, you had to do that too, to craft that story. So the skills intertwine.
Well, writing a book it's very freeing. It's very, very freeing because you're creating something that may or may not be in the world right now. And you're using your own creative backstory and your own, just thought process to get it done. And it's just it's so different than writing, academic work or anything like that.
Right.
And I just find this kind of work, very enlightening and just very freeing and, is just helping shape have an impact like just one book and one lesson at a time.
So what was your writing process like? I interviewed someone a few weeks ago. He wrote a book too, and he was telling me he woke up an hour before he had to every single day to get his writing in. And one of his favorite quotes was talking about how you have to be prepared to throw away 1,000,000 words that you wrote, which I thought was interesting.
Well, I mean, that's the approach, the kill your darlings approach. I think you might have something similar.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big fan of what Dan Brown said, which is like, you know, everything that's been written has been written before. You just need to find your why, and that leads to your how. You know, for me, it was going back to basics, though, back in time to when I was struggling and when I had that challenge, and to really find a way to replicate the best of us in society in the main character in the book, Bryce Holloway. And that's what the story turned out to be. You know, it started as a rough kind of idea, then it was refined and refined and refined. So it went through about like 15 edits amongst myself and my editor, and just going day in and night and day, and just like going line by line by line. And even before the book was published, I purchased proof copies of the book on Amazon, and I went through those myself, and you know, just took things out and replaced them with things. And that's the importance of having like a support system of beta readers around you to give you that kind of like unvarnished feedback and approach.
Yeah, agreed. I remember the woman I worked with that edited my book, her giving me notes, literally writing like, no one cares about this like you care about it, right? Like they're like, this is very selfish of you, Myles. Like, take this out. I'm like, but I like that part. Like, well, it's not about you, right? So it is important to have those people.
For sure.
Yeah. So we got a couple of comments here I'm going to bring in, because I love it when this guy comments. His energy is like nuts. So you're going to read basically like every incredible adjective that you could ever think of from Kenneth here. He's always like the hype guy in the comments. So Ken, thanks for tuning in on LinkedIn and watching, my friend. And he's also giving you a shout out too, basically saying the same thing. So there you go.
Love, my friend.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So you mentioned your father, right? And big part of what I talk about with unseen work, I got 3 types. It's generational, active, and passive. So I love starting with the family stuff, because for me, I feel like, you know, the only reason folks like you and me can show up and have this conversation, write books, do what we're doing, is because of the foundation that was set for us by our parents and our grandparents. And we don't get to see that. We can hear their stories, but we weren't there while they were putting in the work to give us our opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So for you, I'm interested in this because your father is an author.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you know, how that plays in to, you know, that generational unseen work for you. So people who, if you're not familiar with the last name Sharma, your father's Robin Sharma. I know I read the 5 a.m. Club by him. Fantastic book. He's got many others. So by all means, your dad's famous, right? So sure. What's that like to now be an author like your dad is?
It means everything. You know, it means everything. And like his influence is just so profound, and just so grateful to just be around him and just soak up every insight. I mean, our home was filled with books when I was growing up, and still is right now. And our conversations have just been insightful, profound. His approach to and the rigor he takes certainly had an impact on me in terms of creating and the craft of the work, for sure. And his support has just been absolutely amazing. He's a true rock for me with the forward in the book, and just at every single step of the way. You know, law school, law, everything. It's just been amazing.
So do you feel like it's helped you or hurt you with your book?
No, it's helped me tremendously, because those elementary insights really shaped my own approach. I mean, I'll give you an insight. So the book launched officially October 13th, 2020. So we had a book launch. And he was part of the book launch. And then, you know, I went home. I said, you know, what can I improve on? How can I get better each and every single step of the way? Because it's an iterative process. You never stop learning. You never stop growing. And especially when you're trying to do work like this, it's so important to have someone that has kind of walked that path to help you not make it easier, but can give you that guidance from a very fresh perspective.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like almost anybody who's published a book would love to be able to pick your dad's brain about all those things, right? And you get the built-in mentor / father right there, which is awesome.
I'm so grateful for each and every single thing he's taught me and shared with me on anything, life, business, book, anything.
So what's interesting about this for me is you're the first person I've interviewed and talked about generational unseen work where you've done something similar to a parent. Most often I find that people choose to do the complete opposite thing of their parents. It's like they grow up and, you know, their parents might put pressure on them to follow in their footsteps. And it's like the rebellious moment where you say, no, I'm going to do my own thing, and you're off. And so you've done it in your own way, but it's a very similar path. So were you ever not going to write a book, or was this always something you saw and knew you wanted to model?
I was drawn to writing a book from quite a beginning, for sure. I don't know the exact precise time, but I knew I had a book that I wanted to write in some way, shape, or form. So, but then, you know, and I confessed my passion to my dad. He's like, go for it, tremendously. But then I had to work on, you know, what can I bring to the table? And I think when we're first starting off, there's a sense of, you know, imposter syndrome and self-doubt in the process, which is natural for sure. But I think that comes because, you know, and the Indian kind of mentality is like, you know, just be the traditional archetypes, traditional jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have like intelligent people, but they're just like, you know, am I really supposed to be writing a book at this young of an age? I mean, I started writing kind of the draft of the Curveball when I was 21. So there was that kind of self-doubt in the process. But
Sure.
Then when I got to the why, what led to the how, and the story flushed itself out, then it got easier to be like, okay, you know, this can be interesting. And then, you know, what made it all the more amazing was COVID. I mean, I know that's ironic to say, but it was an amazing marketing message to shape, which is a curveball. We've been thrown a curveball of a pandemic, and life is all about curveballs, which is, and when life goes to an unexpected path, how do you navigate that with grit, resiliency to find your best self and live a life of impact and success?
Yeah, I hear you on the COVID thing. I know a lot of people in 2020, it was like there were turtles going into their shells and were like sheltering in place. And I know other people that made it really work for themselves. You know, you're one of those people. And same thing. I think maybe our books hit Amazon like the same week in October, which is funny.
Yeah.
But so I had the same thought. I'm like, this is perfect. I had this idea of unseen work, feeling unseen. And what happened in 2020? We were like stuck in our houses and literally couldn't see each other. Right. So it is funny how you have the idea and then like the universe supports it in a way, right? Where circumstances work out.
Honestly, it's just manifestation. It's just karma. It's just fate in a way.
So I know you're big talking about failure. I've seen some of your other stuff in getting ready for this interview where you've talked about failure quite a bit. I love talking about failure too. It's like success. Yeah, that's great. You wrote a book, you published it. Cool. Like awesome. But let's talk about the, like you said, the gritty stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And part of that's failure.
Yep.
And I've got two frameworks around failure I like to explore with people. One is the flip, which is fail, learn, improvise, pivot. So this is you failed, but you made it work for you, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the flop, which is fail, lie, obsess, pretend, where you did not make it work for you. You didn't turn it into learning. It would be what I called a true failure. I love thinking about it like face down in the dirt, like you're flopped, you're done, you gave up, right? So do you have examples of either of these that tie into the book?
Instances for sure. That tie into the book or just in general?
Well, so just in general, but I'm curious, like, you know, with the book, like did a failure help prompt the book, or do you have any failures along the way of writing the book? Or if you got one in general, I'll take them all. For sure.
So I didn't do too well in my grade 10 grammar exam, which in Canada we have to do. I don't know why. I didn't do too well in that, and it's ironic that, you know, I'm here several whatever years later with a book of mine, and you know, that was a time for sure. And it was just like, you know, when you're in that process, in the school process, it's like, oh my God, like that was so, you know, challenging. I can't believe I didn't do as well as I thought I did. And, you know, there's all those kinds of feelings. And it's like, oh, how would that react at home? What is this going to look like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of shove it under the rug a bit. But then my teacher was like, you know, you still have tremendous potential, you know, with your writing. You have a very charismatic outlook to you. You know, don't let this kind of define you. I'd say the second thing was when I was working in law last year. The managing partner was like, you know, she called me into her office. She was like, you know, I don't think this is the right fit for you and, you know, your disposition. I'm like, well, what do you really mean by that? And she's like, you need to really say, you know, is this where I see myself? And I believe in you and I believe in your personality. You have a tremendous personality, but I don't think this is the right path for you. I think pursue your work, pursue the written work, pursue your book, because I'd given her a copy of the book at my interview. So those were two dramatic instances that kind of really led me down that this is a path that I truly do want to walk on, and I really see myself walking for the foreseeable future.
That'd be a rough conversation, though. You're at work and your boss calls you in and says, I don't think this is working.
Yeah,
maybe, you know, maybe do this book thing.
My God, man, like, you know, the ego, which I talk in the book, we can get to, but the ego really was taken down a notch because I'm like, you know, I'm just immaculately dressed and I brought her the book for the interview and, like, you know, I'm trying my best. And, you know, sometimes you do need to be taken down a notch and your ego needs to be hammered a bit for you to get those, what life is truly offering you. And that kind of feeds into the lesson to begin the book, which is sometimes you need to lose something to find everything, to find your true calling, to find your true path that only, you know, the universe and has in store for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like, what do you want versus what do you need?
Yeah.
Right? And then once the ego gets out of the way of that, the path becomes clear.
Exactly. And, you know, to begin the book, I mean, the main character is so full of ego. And it's remarkable to see his transformation as the book carries on. How he, you know, embraces these lessons from this, like, ghost mentor he has that really helps guide him on his path.
So I've not written fiction before. So when you say the character, right, like, how did you make this person? You invented a person. What is that process like? How do you do that?
It was consciously trying to find, you know, the best and the duality that we have as human beings, which is, you know, in times of great stress and adversity, we are resistant to change. We are resistant, you know, and because we crave a locus of control. Human beings always want to be in control of emotions, surroundings, feelings, etc. So I wanted to create someone like that, someone that, you know, and obviously it was dramatized a bit, but, you know, it was just people that, you know, I looked up to, that people that, you know, Bryce Harper is an amazing baseball player. So I wanted to find a way to bring his strengths, like, into the book as well.
Got it. So we talked about generational unseen work and the impact of your father. Another one I'd love to explore is passive unseen work. So this is the idea that in life, we've got all these experiences. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they don't seem like they're connected at all, but in the background, they're passively compounding and building off of one another to bring us to some new reality we never could have foreseen, right? Yeah. So for me, an example is like how we're even having this conversation right now, mm-hmm. right? Like I never would have thought I was going to do a live stream and make it a podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got different experiences with, you know, giving presentations or just audio podcasts or an opportunity, this, that, or the other thing, where one day it was like, oh, wait, it all comes together here, right? Mm-hmm. So for you in life in general, and we can keep it in the theme of the book again if you want.
Yeah.
Is there anything where like there are individual experiences for you that you had that at the time of each seemed like they didn't make sense, but now you finish the book, we're talking about it, you can look back and connect the dots and see how they helped make it all possible?
Well, it was just the journey that I went through. It was the journey that I went through, and I was open and willing to say that, this is something I'm truly passionate about. And I wanted to find a way to bring that into the book and incorporate that somehow. It was a compound effect of all the lessons and all the mentorship and all the experiences that I went through that really helped make this book possible in a way.
Yeah. So non-book related. Go ahead.
Not book related. Yeah. So the character Bryce is going through something very similar in the breaking down of his ego. The mask that was omnipresent is being surrendered. He's getting enlightened again. He's letting go of his vices, and he's transforming himself anew for the betterment of his team, his family, and everyone that he knows.
Got it. So what about you? What's a crazy experience you had that's unrelated to writing or this book that you still draw upon today and you make it work for you?
What's a crazy experience?
I could give you an example from my life if you need to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Or if you have one, you tell me.
I just need some time. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So I'll filibuster here. I'll give you an example from me, and you can while you're thinking.
Yeah.
So for me, a crazy experience, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but I was just thinking about it the other day, is I used to take flight lessons.
Yeah.
So I have like 20 hours in the left seat of an airplane, flying a plane. And I've had the opportunity to fly a plane by myself before. But the instructor was looked over. He's like, I think you're ready to do this by yourself. Do you want to?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, let's do it. So he hops out. It's just me in an airplane. And I'm doing what they call touch and goes, where I'm taking off, flying the pattern, and then landing again, communicating to air traffic control, right? And so for me, one specific time this happened, I was up in the air, and air traffic control comes over the radio. I'm flying by myself, and they call out my tail number, and they're like, hey, there's a medevac helicopter in the area. I need you to just hold a 360-degree turn. Basically, like just fly circles in the air and stay in one spot so that that helicopter can have the right of way.
Right.
And so here I am, literally just like this in an airplane, just going in circles for like 5 minutes. But it was wild. It was stressful. It was crazy. But it was one of those moments where I just had to rely on the training, follow the checklists, talk to air traffic control. And then when it was all over, I came out, I landed the plane, and I was done. And I think about that randomly sometimes now, where I'm in a stressful situation. I get thrown a curveball. Like that was a curveball I got in the air.
Yeah.
And you just react in the moment and kind of revert back to like, the training or muscle memory, and you get through it.
Yeah.
And then you don't really appreciate what it is you just accomplished or overcame or circumvented in that moment until you get on the ground, literally or metaphorically, when the event's over. And so for me, that's something where I can remind myself, like I'm having a bad day.
Yeah.
Some curveball gets thrown my way. It's like, man, you flown a plane like by yourself and figured out this. And that's just a very small example of stuff pilots have to overcome in a plane.
Yeah.
But it's neat. And I can think about that and just remind myself what I'm capable of when stuff gets stressful, because that was pretty stressful when it happened, and I'm still here to talk about it. So that's an example from me. Curious if you have one.
I don't know if this is a crazy example, but I went to school in Kingston, Ontario, at Queen's University, and then all of a sudden, I found this like pathway to get me into law school earlier in the Caribbean. So I was like uprooted from what I'd known in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada, and I went to this like foreign school abroad, and that experience was just so profound for me, and it's just taught me so much about resiliency and independence, and created like a boatload of friends and new memories. Yeah,
I'm sure. I mean, I've visited a country before, like another country before. I haven't lived in another country. That's a whole other level where you figure out what you're made of, right, and how resilient you are.
Currency's new, climate's new, like environment's new, surroundings.
Yeah. And so that's a curveball, or you have multiple curveballs.
Totally.
I'm curious why you think when some people get a curveball, they swing and they miss.
Why did they swing and why did they miss?
So you can hit a curveball and you can still knock it out of the park. You can hit a home run off a curveball, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes some people strike out when the curveballs come their way. Why do you think some people strike out?
Because the ego is not in check enough. They're not doing the work on the ego to really prevent that. They're aiming for perfection in the expense of inner reflection. They're not, they're not appreciating the power of the ego and the sand trap that when we hit adversity, and as I share at page 23 of the book, adversity really does love your ego. So that's kind of why, it's not, they hit and they miss. People are just so carried forward by the misses, and it's important to know that the ego can really sandbag.
I just wrote down something you said because I love it. It's such a good soundbite. You got to tell me if this is a Colby Sharma original here. Aiming at perfection at the expense of reflection. That rolls right off the tongue, but that's a great. It's a great thought, man.
It is an ism, yeah. And throw in adversity loves your ego.
There you go. I like that. I think that's a really good point. It's like we literally are our own worst enemies sometimes, right? And we are the reason we strike out. And then the ego makes us point the finger at somebody else instead of owning up to it and breaking it down.
Exactly. The concept of the inner saboteur is very, very important when we're talking about backups against the wall and, strike two and there's 3 balls and, it's a full count and et cetera, et cetera. But, when we're faced with that, and sometimes we get into a state called the king baby mentality. So because we're faced with a challenge, there's a tendency to numb out and not go within and just numb out completely. And that creates the safety like it was in the womb, where with minimal effort, we can just achieve maximum results, though. It doesn't work that way. So that is what we kind of feel sometimes, which is, I just want to go in, that caring warmth of the womb. And that's the king baby phenomenon. And that came from one of Freud's disciples. And it's, pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. That's worth the old Google later. I'll have to look that up and dig into that one more.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, right? You wrote the book, right? So that for me, writing a book is an example of active unseen work. That's the third one, where this is going from point A to point B. You had the idea for your book. Now you wrote the book. All that stuff in the middle that we don't see before we can hold the book in our hands, that's the active unseen work, right? So another thing I love just picking people's brains about is you went from point A to point B, right? Now you're staring down the barrel of point C, I call it, which is the oh shit moment that happens when you actually reach point B. Like you did the thing, you wrote the book, you spend years working on it, it's all consuming, and then it finally gets here and it can be that oh no moment. What do I do now? Right? Like now that I'm here, what's next? So what's point C for you? What's next?
So now we're kind of getting to a bit of an inflection point. I want to continue to get some tremendous momentum, certainly around the book. I believe you're from the States, so the States is going to be a massive, massive market. Using the baseball kind of metaphor and shaping the life lessons, it's going to be amazing. So tremendous momentum around the book. On Amazon, etc. Ramping up my speaking, so I do a lot of paid speaking, coaching as well, mentorship. The book was giving a formal published edition as well, which is also on Amazon, so that's pretty cool. Just continue to get momentum. I would ideally love to talk to kids and youth and teens and really help them with whatever they're going through right now, because they've been tremendously impacted by this pandemic, and appreciate a lot of opportunity to really help a lot of people.
For sure. Yeah, I think so much of it, especially when we talk about younger kids, is like they need to see that you can hit the curveball.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so that's where your story of your personal struggle you overcame with a learning disability. It's not like you're up there just preaching this idea that sounds good.
Yeah.
You've been through it and you're proof to them like, hey, I'm not just talking about this. It's possible. It's like the 4-minute mile thing, right? Everyone thought you couldn't do it. Then somebody did it. Exactly. And now a lot of people do it. So,
and we're in a time where people crave authenticity, authentic connection, not some remote dude, just preaching, like you said.
Yeah.
Like, it's so important these days, especially.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we were forced to live in the remote world, right? Now people are craving that human interaction, actually see somebody. And
it's just only natural, for sure. I mean, COVID was an immense, unprecedented, human experiment on how much adversity we can actually deal with. And that's going to unveil the true grit and resiliency we have as we get into the stage of, mass vaccinations and openings up and et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably write the Curveball too, like bases loaded or something, right? With just featuring people and how they dealt with the curveball of COVID. I mean, that's a whole book right there, I'm sure, where there's got to be so many incredible stories of how people were able to react and make something wonderful out of something horrible.
Totally.
There you go. If you use bases fully loaded, I just want a free copy. If you can have that. All right.
Okay. Sounds good.
So you mentioned Amazon. People can also go to your website, colbysharma.com, right? Where else should we direct folks your way?
For sure. So colbysharma.com, mailing list, coaching is on the tabs on the website, contact as well. You can get the Amazon copy, ebook, paperback, audiobook. The formal published copy is only in paperback right now. Follow me on Instagram, Colby Sharma Official, Facebook, the Curveball 426, and LinkedIn as well. And
awesome.
Also, I can send you the link for my coaching service as well.
Cool. Yeah, send it over. We can put that in the show notes when the podcast goes up on the listening apps. So we'll get it out there.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, Colby, thank you. I've loved chatting with you, and all the baseball metaphors. I could have kept going, but I kept my puns to a minimum. So
thank you. It's been an honor, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.